The Earnestly Speaking Podcast is a show that is founded on free-flowing conversation and may at times venture into mature subjects. Listener discretion is advised.
First Speaking Podcast coming to you on July 26, 2022. How you guys doing on this beautiful, kind of rainy day today, but, cloudy, but still beautiful anyway. On Tuesday night here in South Florida. Just put my kids down for bed for the night. Quiet house, wife's at work, kids are asleep. We're winding down the final days, weeks rather, of summer vacation. They go back to school in exactly 2 weeks from tomorrow. Should be an interesting time once that happens, especially my youngest one starting kindergarten this year, which I will say, and I'll speak about this later on in the coming weeks, that it's going to open up a lot of cool things in the future. I wasn't planning on doing a podcast tonight at all, but then I got inspired. You know what happens? Sometimes you're hanging out during the day. I'm watching TV and binging content. I'm hanging out with my kids and just kind of doing whatever, and then all of a sudden, I didn't make any plans to record tonight, and all of a sudden I'm like, you know what? Kind of want to record now, because I've been pretty much going week to week for the most part the last couple of weeks. Like I'll probably do at least one solo podcast a week. If I'm lucky, I put in a conversation interview with someone, depends. But it's been pretty much steady paced show for the last few weeks now, which is fine. Put more time on my family, and as I said too, also it's a lot harder. It's not hard to get guests on the show too when you have a limited schedule during the summer, because typically, I like during the school year, I record a lot of my shows during the day, especially on a Tuesday day. But obviously the days now are impacted because of the fact my kids are home from school because of vacation. But that's going to end in a couple weeks. So, but also I got inspired today too because I just remembered now, although the first episode of this podcast was launched actually in August of 2011. Technically, I recorded my first podcast, which actually was a pilot. This week was I just realized this week was 11 years of podcasting. I actually did my first episode, which I never released, actually. First time I podcasted 11 years ago this week. Late July, early August. I can't remember the exact date, but it's still close enough, right? And I'm stunned that I'm still doing this medium 11 years later, still passionate about it, and I can argue I'm probably, if not even more passionate about the medium today than I was in 2011. 2011, of course, if you guys have been rolling with me since then, it's a big year for me. Got married that year, started this podcast months later. It was mainly a sports podcast. It was only sports at that time. It was under a different name at the time as well too. It was based off my old middle school sports show I did back in 8th grade on TV. On TV. It was called EJ Sports Rap. Looking back in hindsight, it was very corny. I probably shouldn't have relaunched it, but at the time that's just what I wanted to do. I was excited about this getting in and having a voice to talk about things I cared about, mainly at the time sports, and that's sports at age 31 was still relatively, after my marriage, was the biggest thing going on in my life. Obviously, this is obviously pre-kids and everything else. But of course, as you guys have been on this ride for 11 years, and I thank you guys, the ones who have been on this ride, whether you came on in 2011, whether you came on 5 years later or recently. This has been a journey. And I've enjoyed every minute of it. This podcast has gone through a lot of changes. Obviously, name change. My wife actually is the one who changed the name of this podcast, I think, about 2 years later. It's been a great ride. This podcast, as I've gone through it, you guys have gone through it with me. From marriage to my kids being born to when I did the radio show for a couple of years. I did a radio show. The many formats, changes. This show has evolved in a big way to where it's gone. Again, you guys know this. It's gone from a sports-centric podcast now it's whatever's on my mind. I'll talk anything, as I said. And it's been amazing that this podcast has now become, I say, in some ways therapeutic. because as I've said in the past too also, I don't have a lot of me time as it is. You have 2 kids, 2 young kids, you got a marriage, you have a job, you have all these other priorities you have as well too. It's harder when you to have your own me time and also things that you enjoy doing. I don't go out much as it is. I don't see a lot of my friends. Again, I'm kind of a homebody anyway too, so I'm not necessarily like saying that it's actually a bad thing. But this podcast has been the one thing I can say in the 11 years, the last decade or maybe, that it's been the thing that, I go through anxiety, stress, this is the thing I always had to rely on in a sense, having a voice and being able to because this is something I really enjoy. This helps my anxiety. This is therapy for me too. Talk about things that matter. I'm someone who loves to talk and have discussions, and and that's the thing also too. I think what I love about the show, one thing else, is that this show is all a lot of me opportunities to network with people, meet people I would never thought would have met in my life, whether it's through doing a wrestling medium, whether it's doing a sports medium, whether it's doing through this, meeting people in media, that, hey, you want to come to my podcast, let's talk about this. Sports writers and journalists and, movie reviewers and, people, my friends of mine. This show has been such a great ecosystem, has created, it's really created a really nice community of people that I've maintained friendships with throughout the years, and you guys know who the guys are, the Mark Francois and obviously Big Jim, James Neese, and Colin Nash, and all the guys that are regulars. Zach DeGenerate was the very first guest on this podcast. He's still a regular. Chris Chrismatic, you name it. This show has been the constant for me. Has been the constant, and to me, it's been the thing that's allowed me to okay, I have all this going on in my life, and whether it's stressful or not, but at least I have this to fall on to at least have a release. And this show, I'm really proud of the show has gone where it's going. And like I said, the evolution of the show has been fantastic. Being able to talk about my family, being able to talk about bring my kids on once in a while. My wife comes on once in a while. Being able to talk about politics and and sports and sometimes pro wrestling, sometimes what movie I'm watching these days or what TV show I'm watching these days, and it's been such a great thing to navigate me through this thing called life, especially as we've added more to the plate. So, I mean, I can't believe I've been podcasting 11 years. I've really been podcasting 11 years. This is crazy. A part of me thought I would do this a couple of years, then it'll go away, and then it is what it is, and then it'll go away. It's a fad, and then whatever. I mean, it's been fantastic that I'm still doing this 11 years later, and no stopping, nowhere do I see a stop coming at any point. This is gonna be forever to me. I'm gonna do this show until I just decide not to, and even if I get burnt out, I navigate that. As I said, recently I was talking about burnout and possible burnout, but a couple months ago. So what I've done is I just adjusted the schedule, So anyway, like I said, to all the folks who've been on part of this ride for 11 years, thank you. Thank you for the downloads, streaming, you name it. You guys, like I said, I do this for me especially too, first and foremost, but I'm glad you guys do enjoy the show and check in, and I love hearing feedback to people, people, friends of mine, and people who I talk to and say, hey, that episode was really cool. You talk about mental health and talk about the NFL season and things like that. I love it. It's fantastic. So again, thank you so much you guys for continuing to support this show, this medium. I love doing it. As I always say too, especially support independent media. Especially support independent media. These guys, there's so much great, talented people doing this for the love of this. A lot of them are in this ecosystem I deal with. Whatever it may be. If you're into pro wrestling, there's amazing wrestling podcasts out there of people I can show you. Sports, mental, variety shows, and personal journals. There's so much great content from people who are not actually in the mainstream. I would dare say some of them even better than the mainstream stuff. So support independent media. Again, thank you so much for the 11 years of being on this, for checking in and supporting the show. So anyway, little NBA talk real quick. Obviously NBA offseason is here. Things died off, in the last couple weeks. Obviously free agency is coming, pretty much gone for the most part. The big story of this offseason, of course, is Kevin Durant. And, of course, he requested a trade from the Nets. I did a emergency podcast the day he requested a trade back in last month. The new rumor now is that the Boston Celtics have now gotten their name in the hat now. They I believe the Celtics offered the Nets a deal. The Nets actually counter-offered. I think the Nets had. The Celtics offered. I think. Let me see here exactly the number, the stats here. All right. So according to Shams Charania of The Athletic, they offered a package. The Celtics offered a package around Jaylen Brown. They offered Jaylen Brown, Derek White, and a draft pick. Nets turned it down, but then they counter offered, asking for Brown, Marcus Smart, multiple draft picks, and at least one more rotation player. Now, if you heard that podcast I did back in late last month, I told y'all that the dark horse of the Durant sweepstakes was the Boston Celtics. Because if you remember back in 2016 when KD decided to go to Golden State, the talk was that the number 2 team, the team that he was considering outside of Golden State, and of course staying in Oklahoma City, I mean, that was always an option, but the other big option that KD was considering at the time was going to Boston. At the time, Boston was rebuilding. They were building up a team at the time, just before they got Kyrie Irving, of course, but they were actually building a team at that point and were in contention. We're trying to, that was the time when Danny Ainge was building up those draft picks and stuff, and they were really on the way up. And KD considered going to Boston at that point. So I said to you guys on this show that the big dark horse for KD this time will be the Celtics. Now, I'm not saying that is going to be that's what's going to happen, but they do have some assets. And I said Jaylen Brown will probably be the piece that they would probably mostly put on the table, which, of course, as you see here, look, I'm not sure this is going to happen or not. Anything can happen at this point, And again, the Nets don't have to rush anything. The Nets have 4 years left on this KD deal. I mean, I'm not saying they're going to wait out the whole 4 years, but again, it goes to show you that there's no rush here. Okay, they can take their time here. It's not like don't trade KD for nothing. Later on, if you don't trade me for the deadline next year, then you have nothing. You won't get anything from him back. The Nets have a lot of time here to sit and look at what's on the table first. To see what teams have out there, and but I do think Boston's definitely a real threat for this because I'll say this much. Let's say, assuming, and by the way, if I'm the Nets, if I'm the Celtics, I mean I have no qualms about giving up Marcus Smart to make this happen. You get Jaylen Brown back as the Nets. Jaylen Brown, Ben Simmons, tandem, assuming Ben Simmons is back to relatively his old self prior to the mental breakdown. That's not a bad team there. That's not a bad situation there. The Nets might even be a playoff team at that point. So it's not a bad situation there. It's not a bad, again, there's been an offer and a counter offer. Obviously this thing can go anywhere. I honestly believe that both KD and Kyrie will be at training camp come September, October. I think there's not enough out there for teams to want to bite on this, at least not yet. And the Nets want a lot. And again, the Nets can sit on this for a long time. The ownership has already said that they're out of the Kyrie business and all that. So we'll see how that goes. But I think the Celtics, as I said before, the Celtics are a real threat to getting KD, and now their name's in the hat. There's already been an offer and a counter offer on top of that too. So look out for that. That should be a very interesting situation. as it plays on the coming days and weeks, and we'll see how long that goes. All right, let's see here. NFL training camp officially started today, and for some teams. I don't know if you saw, guys saw Aaron Rodgers come to camp today with looking at Nicolas Cage. It's crazy. I'm really excited. Look, I love baseball. I was obviously really excited about the Mets this year. That having their first place, having a great season. But NFL around the corner, I can't wait. This is going to be a fantastic season. Training camp starting for most teams already today. There's a lot of things I'm looking forward to talking about with the NFL season. A lot of storylines I'm really interested in seeing how play out. Obviously, the AFC West and the stacked AFC West. All four teams can actually go to the playoffs this year. Russell Wilson in Denver. I'm so fascinated by that. Obviously, Tua Tagovailoa and the Dolphins, and is this the year they finally break through in that conference? It'll be really tough, obviously, but they've given Tua a lot of weapons now to work with in Miami. We'll see how that goes. I was rooting for them, my number 2 team after the Giants. Lamar Jackson, of course, the disrespect. We had a unnamed defensive coordinator say, was quoted as saying that this guy could win 12 MVPs. He's not a quarterback in my eyes. Like, stop it. Like, stop. He's like a fool. And to make it worse about that, I would have more respect for that coordinator, that person, if you actually put your name to paper on that. But the fact you want to stay anonymous, it says a lot about you. I think the dark horse is going to be the Vikings in the NFC. Actually, the NFC is really, really, really weak. Which now goes to my next storyline also too. I'm actually intrigued by, and it's going to be kind of a hot take here, but I'm going to say it anyway. I think it's a very good possibility of 3 teams in the NFC East going to the playoffs. I think the Cowboys, the Commanders, formerly the Redskins, formerly football team, and the Eagles are the 3 teams that can possibly make the playoffs this year. The NFC is weak. Okay, people going to say, well, what are you talking about? How's that possible? Well, look at it this way. Here's your guarantees, of course. I think I have Dallas when obviously we'll discuss this in coming weeks when we do our NFL previews and stuff. But right now I have the Cowboys winning the East. I have the Bucks winning the South. I have the Packers winning the North right now, although that could be touchy. We'll see. And I have the Rams winning the West. Now, the teams that can spoil that situation in the East, to me, honestly, are the Vikings in the North, and I think the Vikings have a very good chance to make the playoffs as well too. I think they're a very interesting team this year. I think this is the year. This is the make it break it year for Kirk Cousins. If either you break through, try to become a top 10 guy in the league, or get out the pot. So they could be one of the teams that can spoil that in the East. In the South, there's no one in the South that outside the Bucks that can do anything. The Saints, look, I know people say the Saints will be good this year. I have to see, believe it. No Sean Payton. We'll see how Dennis Allen goes, how he does there. I don't see it. The Falcons going to stink this year. Panthers were rebuilding as well too. The West is interesting too because logic says the Niners should be the other team in the West outside of Rams to make it. But Trey Lance is now announced starting quarterback now. How good is he? We don't know. Does Jimmy G get another chance if Trey Lance actually, shits the bed this year? Who knows? The Cardinals, they gave Kyler Murray that big extension, the big contract, but they're not gonna have DeAndre Hopkins for the first 6-7 weeks of the year. That can hurt. And then the Seahawks are gonna stink this year. So, meanwhile, you have the Eagles ascending. The Cowboys are still pretty solid for the most part. And then the Commanders, I'll be honest with you, I think Carson Wentz has a turnaround this year. I think Carson Wentz has a, people think I'm crazy. I'm like a big Carson Wentz fan out there, obviously. But I think Carson Wentz has a turnaround year this year. For the record, he wasn't that bad last season. He wasn't that bad. He had a bad, rough 2 games down the stretch. But he had a bad year last year overall with the Colts. Especially considering the fact that he started, 1-4 last year. So I think Washington's a team to look out for, and also in the NFC. So those are the storylines I'm really intrigued by this season as we enter training camp now. So anyway, what else here? Obviously, I did an emergency podcast with this last week on the Unfiltered podcast. By the way, you can check that out, of course, on Earnestly Speaking Unfiltered on any podcast platform. Vince McMahon officially out as CEO of the WWE. Not fired. He retired last Friday, and then a report came out yesterday that they found some money that he allegedly used that was again shareholders' money. They're gonna apparently they're gonna re-release the quarterly findings from the years that the years are impacted, of course. So, but here's the thing about all this now. Forget the allegations and stuff, because look, we know that Vince is not a good guy. We know Vince has been someone that's been controversial, and he's never claimed to be a great human being. Okay. The reason why you should be excited if you're a wrestling fan about Vince McMahon being gone is that for all the great and good and great he's done for this company through the years, okay, he has been, and I've always said this too, like, he's probably the hardest working rich guy I've ever seen in my life, but he's also that guy to a detriment as well too, okay, and a lot of people, including myself, have said through the years that he has too much control over booking. And some of the booking on WWE, especially on the television shows, especially on Raw and SmackDown to some degree, has been stale or just not good at all. And now with the word about Triple H, Paul Levesque being head of creative officially now, I have a lot more faith now that this is going to be an inflection point for WWE moving forward. We're going to see probably more creative, say it twice, we're going to see probably much more diversity, because a lot of also what Vince was doing too and believed in back, has been very dated now. I believe that Paul Levesque and Triple H, Paul Levesque, aka Triple H, I say, is going to come with more fresher ideas to creative, the booking. And I just think this is actually going to be a good thing for the company moving forward. So I know a lot of people, anti-WWE fans or AEW, AEW marks, sitting there saying, oh, well, Vince is gone, this company's dead. This might be the thing that makes WWE even more relevant than it already is now. Because now you took the guy that actually you could argue has hurt the company, as you've been saying for years. You stopped watching the product because of Vince's booking. Vince is gone now. You got a guy like Triple H, who did wonders with NXT for the last couple of years. This is a good thing, I believe, for the company moving forward. Thank you, Vince, for the years of service, 40 years, all that, but it's time. So this is to be a positive. I mean, and some of the reports, I didn't watch Raw last night, but some of the feedback on Raw last night has been very positive, and expect more of that, I believe, in the days and months to come. Obviously, we'll see how if there's any plans to shake up SummerSlam, because this is a go home week for SummerSlam. We'll see if anything major happens. I doubt it, at least right now, but anything's possible. But I think Vince being gone for the current product is a great thing. I really believe that. So, all right, finally, before I go, so you guys know I'm a pretty diehard Metallica fan. I actually watched randomly too. I didn't plan on watching this. I just kind of ran into it randomly on Netflix a couple days ago. But I randomly watched Metallica, some kind of monster documentary last week. Just random. Didn't plan on watching it. I was on Netflix. I was going through things, trying to find things to watch and things to save on my queue, and it happened to pop up again. I've seen some kind of monster so many times. I lost count. I've seen that thing at least 30, 40, 50 times, that came out 20 years ago. But I haven't watched the documentary in years. Probably about at least 5 years. Some of you guys don't know about what the documentary is about. It's basically about the band in 2001. They filmed in 2001, 2003. Basically, it was initially supposed to be the making of Saint Anger, the album which would become Saint Anger. They started recording this album literally, I think, weeks after Jason Newsted, their second bassist, had left the band. Abruptly left the band. And again, cameras started rolling in April 2001. They rented out a bass called the Presidio up in the barracks somewhere. It's an old army base. Changed up the songwriting way to do things before. The way they used to write songs back, up to that point was They have riff tapes, and James and Lars would be the ones that would organize, and they'd be the ones, pretty much in a dictatorial way, be the ones putting the songs together. They tried out, this time around, and I think largely because of Jason leaving the band, they decided to, just rent out this space and just jam, right? Not having preconceived ideas of songs, just, jam out, record, and whatever songs, riffs they come out with is what it is. And, of course, like I said, what was initially supposed to be a makeup of an album ended up being something deeper than that. James had been going through a lot of home issues. He ended up going to rehab. He was gone from the band for at least 9 months, close to a year. The band was broke up because of it. It was a very, very revealing documentary. I saw this documentary actually in theaters in 2004 when it first came out. I'm a hardcore fan. I couldn't, not see it. And the reason why I want to talk about this today was because it hit me watching the documentary that it hit me differently this time around. Like, this is 20 years ago. So when this came out, I was 24 years old. And I understood what was going on in the band, the change in the band, but it didn't hit me in the same way because 2004, I'm 24 years old. I'm still young. I'm still partying, do my thing. I was in a band at the time too, especially do my own thing. But now I'm 42 years old. And I believe this documentary has aged very, very well. As at the time when this thing came out, they were made fun of because it revealed a lot about the band, in terms of this is the mighty Metallica. All of a sudden, you've seen James Hetfield taking his daughter to ballet. Lars and his artwork, and they're whining and complaining about schedules and all that stuff. And and they said it themselves too that when this came out, a lot of their brethrens and their peers made fun of them because you're not supposed to be sensitive. You're Metallica. You're the mighty Metallica. You're the biggest heavy metal band in the world. We don't talk about feelings here. Therapists? What the fuck are you getting a therapist for? And yet, that's what this was. They got a therapist named Phil Toll in there, and they're paying him $40,000 a month. Jesus. But this, as I watched this again for the first time in a couple of years, and of course, probably watched this for like the 200th time, the 200th or 300th time, whatever. This thing has really aged well because the things they were talking about on that documentary back in 2001, 2, and 3, ultimately in 4, mental health and all this stuff, and therapy. That was taboo back then. Not just in the metal community, but just in general. Nobody was talking about mental health. We were all about suck it up, bootstraps, and if you got issues, fuck it. Suck it up. Today, obviously, we know mental health is a major issue. It's something that's mainstream. It's something that we now take a lot more seriously now than we did in 2004. And you watch this documentary, it's like, wow. These guys talking about the feelings. This is the mighty Metallica talking about the feelings, and you have Lars who gets into him. Meeting Dave Mustaine. If you guys don't know about Dave Mustaine, Dave Mustaine is the frontman from Megadeth. He was also the guitar player for Metallica prior to them firing him before they did Kill 'Em All, recorded Kill 'Em All in 1983. And he goes into detail how, like, him and James, while they are the founders of the band, James has you can't find two more polar opposite founders of a band than James and Lars. James being, conservative and hunter and machismo, and his Lars is liberal, short Danish dude, but it works. The marriage works, obviously. And Lars gets into it about how, like, when James can be, when him and James are alone, and when they're actually, on the same page, and when they, drink together, that, like, it's like they're brothers, and, like, he can be sensitive and all this stuff. But then when James is hanging out with Dave Mustaine or other people in the room, he turns into a complete asshole and bullies Lars, and it gets into all that stuff, man. All that stuff. And for the record, I'll say it again, the balls Jason had to leave that band. People say, well, why did he leave the band for? Well, okay. So one of the issues in that documentary too, especially was, and he made it clear in the documentary. He said, these guys, Kirk, James, and Lars, they have a lot of stuff on their plate now. At that point, they had started having families now. At that point, James, Lars, and Kirk had started having kids. Okay, Jason made a decision to not have children. Okay, but because those guys have things to fill their time now, when they take breaks off albums and stuff, off tour, Jason needs to fill his time up with other things. So his idea of filling up time when Metallica's going to break was to do side projects. Well, James Hetfield, as you can see in this documentary as well too, has an issue with abandonment issues and control issues, and basically told him, no, I can't be in a band with you if you're going to do other projects. And Jason's like, well, I can't take restrictive, orders like that, And James, of course, and James acknowledges too, the years later, that it was wrong, but Jason was the sacrificial lamb for that band, pretty much. And Jason, and for the record, I say this too because Jason is my favorite member of that band of all time. But yeah, it's a fantastic documentary. If you haven't seen it, it's on Netflix. It's still on Netflix. I think it'll be for a little while. Some Kind of Monster. Like I said, the Lars David Mustaine reunion is fantastic. When they get into the just all of it. You need to watch it, of course. And I said it ages well now, especially in an era of mental health now. It ages so much better now. To me, I'm not even going to sound biased here, but to me, it is the best and most transparent music documentary I've ever seen in my life. It's so fucking honest. It really is. So, all right, that's good for now. That's about 30 minutes there. So, again, I'm on Twitter at EJChristian7. Earnestly Speaking Podcast, all podcast catchers. We'll talk soon. Look for the next podcast soon. Later, guys.